You're a boring mistake, Monique. I need someone on my arm tonight who actually photographs like an asset. Grant said it into the mirror, straightening his cufflinks, not once looking at her reflection standing behind him. She did not cry. She did not ask him to take it back. She set the leather planner she had been holding onto the dresser, the one with the cracked spine and 11 years of handwriting inside it, and she walked to the closet. Grant kept talking, the way men do when they've rehearsed an ending and no one has interrupted them yet. Something about the lease, about timing, about Anastasia's schedule, and the photographers who'd be there by 7. He used the word arrangement twice. Monique wasn't listening anymore. She pulled down a small fireproof box from the top shelf, the kind with a lock that had stopped working around year 3, back when the company was 2 folding tables and a fax machine above Ferris Street laundromat. She didn't open it. She just held it against her hip, the way you hold something you're not sure you're still allowed to keep. He didn't ask why she was holding a box instead of a suitcase. He never asked her much of anything anymore. A knock at the door. HR apparently didn't wait for business hours anymore. The woman in the doorway had a folder and an apologetic mouth, and inside the folder was one page ending Monique's title, effective immediately. Grant hadn't even asked which door they used. 12 days until the gala. 12 days until he stood in front of every investor who mattered and called this an arrangement. Monique picked up her keys. She did not look back at the mirror. The car still smelled like the cologne Grant wore for board meetings, the expensive kind he ordered by the case twice a year. Monique noticed it the way she noticed most things about him now. Completely and without much feeling attached to the noticing. She drove north on Providence Road with the fireproof box belted into the passenger seat, upright, the way you'd secure something that mattered more than everything else she'd grabbed from the closet in 4 minutes. She didn't open it in the car. She didn't open it at the first red light either, though she looked at it twice. She exited it for Ferris Street without meaning to. The laundromat that used to sit under their first office was a coffee shop now, the kind with a chalkboard menu and a line out the door on Saturdays. Nobody waiting in that line knew a company worth what Whitfield Capital Group was worth, now had started in the 2 rooms above it. 11 years ago, Whitfield Capital Group had been 2 folding tables and a fax machine above that laundromat, and Monique had kept the books on a yellow legal pad because they hadn't been able to afford software yet. Her signature was on the first business loan the bank in that same strip mall ever approved for them, $4,000 co-signed, her handwriting steadier than his. 11 years later, her signature was still on every loan renewal the company had filed. Her name had never once appeared in any of the 11 anniversary press releases the marketing team put out every October. 6 years and 2 months ago, the board had asked Grant to formalize a real leadership team before their first institutional funding round. That was the year Monique became Vice President of Community Relations, a title that came with a parking space and nothing resembling a vote. She remembered the all-hands meeting where he announced it, remembered standing near the back of the room clapping along with everyone else for her own demotion, dressed up as a promotion in a blazer she'd bought for the occasion because someone told her it was a big day for her. She had understood, even then, what the title actually meant. She had taken it anyway, because leaving would have meant explaining to people why, and she hadn't had an answer yet that didn't sound like something was wrong. Something had been wrong for longer than she wanted to count. She checked into an Extenstauf, Tyvola Road, $89 a night, plus tax paid on the card that was hers alone. The freelance consulting account Grant didn't know existed, built 5 years of small invoices at a time, careful and separate and never once explained to him. $11,240 sat in that account as of that morning. She did the math before she'd even unpacked the box from the car. At $89 a night, that was 126 nights, if nothing else touched it. Nothing else was not a realistic assumption, and she knew it. The room had the same beige carpet as every other room like it, a print of a lighthouse bolted to the wall, an ice machine down the hall that ran all night. She sat on the edge of the bed and made a list on a hotel notepad. Lawyer, insurance, the storage unit code, her mother's number, in that order, and did not write Grant's name anywhere on it. She called Alia Marsh from the parking lot before she went inside. He filed this morning, Monique said, before I even left the house. That's fast, Alia said. Fast is either confidence or fear, we'll find out which. What do we do first? Standard motion for discovery, financial disclosure both sides, full marital estate, He'll probably sign off on it without reading it. Men who move this fast usually don't slow down to read anything they think is beneath them. Monique almost smiled. It was the first true thing anyone had said to her all day. You've done this before. 11 years is a long marriage to end in 12 days, Aaliyah said. Most people slow down. He's speeding up. That tells me something, even if I don't know what yet. Monique didn't know yet that this single ordinary request, the kind Aaliyah had filed 100 times for 100 other clients, would matter for reasons that had nothing to do with furniture or the house on Sycamore Lane. Neither did Aaliyah. It was just paperwork. It stayed just paperwork for 4 more days. The prenup, signed 11 years earlier at a lawyer's office 2 blocks from the courthouse, gave her almost nothing. The furniture she could fit into her car. 45 days of continued health insurance under Cobra. Nothing about the company. Nothing about the 11 years of loan renewals with her handwriting on them, or the 43 payrolls she had personally wired during the 2 recessions the company almost didn't survive. Once from a hospital hallway, twice from the front seat of a rental car, because someone had to make sure people got paid whether or not the marriage did. Grant had drafted that prenup himself, back when he still did his own legal work. Back when he still needed her to read his contracts before he signed them because she caught the mistakes he didn't. She hadn't caught this one. She hadn't been looking for anything of his. She'd been in love, and being in love, she would tell herself later, is its own kind of not reading the fine print. By 9 that night, 3 people she'd known for over a decade had already texted her a photo from a restaurant downtown. Grant and Anastasia, a candlelit table, his hand over hers on the white tablecloth. The Gala, Monique already knew, was where he planned to make it official in front of the exact people whose opinion he had spent 11 years building. 12 days now. She unpacked one bag, left the box on the hotel dresser, and did not open it. She had a countdown that mattered more than a box she hadn't looked inside in 6 years. Whatever was in it could wait. The Gala could not. The email arrived at 6:42 in the morning, forwarded from Aaliyah's office. Grant's attorney had signed off on the discovery motion in under an hour. No changes, no objections, no request for extension. Just a signature and a note that read in full, "Client wants all this moving as fast as possible." Aaliyah called it encouraging. Monique didn't correct her. She'd learned a long time ago that encouraging from a lawyer usually meant "we'll see." She still had access to the company calendar. Nobody had thought to revoke it yet, or maybe somebody had, and the request was sitting in an IT queue behind 40 other tickets that mattered more. Either way, at 7 that morning, out of habit more than intention, she opened it the way she'd opened it every morning for 11 years. Grant's calendar looked the way it always did in the run-up to the Gala. Press interviews, tailor fittings, a call with the event planner blocked out in 30-minute increments. One line, tucked between a 9 o'clock and a 9:30, didn't look like the others. Q4 vendor consolidation review loft. She read it twice. In 11 years of keeping every ledger this company had ever produced, she had never once heard that name. Not in an invoice, not in a board packet, not in the vendor list she used to reconcile herself before the accounting department existed. She didn't know yet that it meant anything. She wrote it down anyway, on the hotel notepad, under the lawyer's number and her mother's number, because writing things down was the only thing that ever made her feel like she still had a hand on the wheel. By 9 that morning, her badge stopped working at the parking garage. She found out at the gate arm, the small red light blinking twice before the barrier refused to lift. The security guard, a man named Willis who had waved her through that same gate for 6 years, didn't quite meet her eyes when he leaned out of the booth. "Systems got you flagged for a visitor badge now, Ms. Whitfield. I can walk you up if you need something." "I don't need anything," she said, and put the car in reverse before he could say anything else. Her mother called that evening, the way she always did on Tuesdays, and Monique almost didn't answer. She picked up on the 4th ring. "You don't sound right," her mother said, no greeting first, the way she'd been saying that same sentence to Monique since she was 9 years old. "I'm fine, Mama. You said that the last time you weren't." Monique didn't argue. She never won that argument. "Whatever this is," her mother said, "you don't have to carry it by yourself just because you're used to carrying things by yourself." Monique looked at the fireproof box on the dresser and didn't answer that either. On Wednesday, a woman she'd known since business school canceled a standing lunch by text, citing a scheduling conflict that didn't quite explain itself. Monique understood it for what it was. Picking a side in a divorce this size wasn't free, Not when Grant still signed half the invitations in this town. That was a Tuesday she'd first seen the calendar line. 2 days later, on Thursday, she called Charisse Boone. Charisse had been Grant's executive assistant for 9 years, long enough to have opinions about him she'd never once said out loud in the building. Monique called under the excuse of picking up a box of personal items still sitting in her old office. A coffee mug, a photo. Nothing that mattered, nothing that was really the point of the call. "They haven't touched your desks," Charisse said. "I think it scares people, like they don't know if it's still yours to touch." "It's not, I know. Doesn't mean people believe it yet." Monique almost laughed. It was the first almost law in 4 days. "You still handling the vendor onboarding?" Monique kept her voice as flat as she could make it, some of it. A pause. "Actually, can I ask you something weird?" "Go ahead. There's a new consulting vendor finance has been paying for a few months. Loft Meridian. Nobody I've talked to has ever met anybody from them. No office address that goes anywhere real. I mentioned it to Grant once and he said it was a specialty firm, very private, very selective about who they work with." Charisse laughed, short and without much humor in it. "I looked them up. Their website has a stock photo of a building in Charlotte that isn't even in Charlotte." Monique didn't say anything for 3 full seconds. "You still there?" Charisse's voice had gone careful. "I'm here," Monique said. "Thanks for the mug." She hung up before Charisse could ask why her voice had changed. She didn't call Alia that night. She didn't call Tanya either, though she thought about it twice. She sat on the edge of the extended stay bed with the hotel notepad open to the page with Loft Meridian written on it in her own handwriting, and underneath it she wrote a question she didn't have an answer to yet. How do you pay a company that doesn't have a building? She had $11,180 left in her account. $60 got gone in 4 flips, mostly gas and a rotisserie chicken she'd eaten cold container 2 nights running, because she hadn't unpacked a single pot or pan and wasn't going to buy any for a life she didn't plan on living in that room. She thought about calling Grant. She got as far as opening his contact information on her phone. His photo still there from a trip to Charleston 6 years ago, both of them squinting into the sun on a dock somewhere. She looked at it for 11 seconds. Then she closed the phone and picked up the fireproof box instead, turned it over once in her hands, and set it back down on the dresser without opening it. Whatever was inside that box had waited 6 years. It could wait a few more days. Loft Meridian could not. By Friday morning, day 4, she had a name, a suspicion, and nothing else. No proof, no documents, no standing to ask for any, not yet, not until Discovery actually returned something real. She called Tanya Okafor at 7:15, before Tanya's kids were even up. Tanya had been the maid of honor at a wedding 11 years ago that neither of them had expected to end this way. She didn't say that out loud. She didn't have to. "I need a favor," Monique said, off the clock, completely unofficial. "How unofficial?" "I can't tell you why yet. I just need you to look at a name for me if it ever crosses a filing anywhere public." Loft Meridian Consulting. There was a pause on the line, the kind Tanya used when she was already thinking harder than she was letting on. "Give me a few days," Tanya said. "And Monique, if this is what I think it might be, you're going to want more than a favor." Monique looked at the countdown she'd written on the mirror in dry erase marker that morning, the one she wiped off every time housekeeping knocked. 8 days. "I know," she said. "I'm counting." Day 5 began with a box, not the fireproof, an actual banker box, delivered by courier to Alia's office, the first batch of financial disclosures Grant's attorney had promised without complaint. 412 pages. Bank statements, wire transfer logs, 3 years of vendor payment schedules, stamped and initialed by people whose names Montgomery didn't recognize anymore, because most of finance had turned over twice since she'd stopped being the one who signed off on any of it. She couldn't read 412 pages in a hotel room with a lamp that flickered. She called Tanya instead. "I can't be your forensic accountant for free forever," Tanya said, only half joking, when Monique showed up at her kitchen table at 9 that night with the whole box balanced against her hip. "Been keeping the porch light on for you like we're 17 again." Tanya's husband, Marks, put 2 mugs of coffee down without a word and went back upstairs, the particular kind of quiet that comes from years of knowing when not to ask questions. "I'll pay you back. You'll tell me what this actually is, eventually. That's the payment." They went through it together after Tanya's kids were asleep, the 2 of them at a table that still had a crayon rubbed into the wood grain near the salt shaker. Tanya worked fast, faster than Monique remembered, flipping past pages that meant nothing and stopping cold on the ones that did. Twice she made Monique repeat a string of numbers back to her, just to be sure neither of them was seeing what they wanted to see, instead of what was actually printed on the page. Here. I turned the laptop around. Loft Meridian Consulting LLC, registered 14 months ago, registered agent. It is O box at a shipping store off South Boulevard. No employees on record. No website beyond the one Charisse found, and even that one's 3 photos and a contact form that doesn't go anywhere. How much has the company paid them? Tanya didn't answer right away. She turned the laptop back around and typed for a while instead. So far, across 6 invoices I can find in this batch alone, $380,000, and this is only 3 years of the discovery window. If this pattern goes back further, that number gets a lot bigger. Monique sat very still. $380,000. Not an affair, not flowers, not a hotel suite, not the kind of thing you could explain away over a lawyer's table. Somebody had been moving real money out of a real company for longer than Anastasia Kane had probably even known Grant existed. I need you to keep going, Monique said. Quietly, I was already going to. Tanya closed the laptop. You know I loved you both at that wedding. I'm not choosing sides here. I'm looking at numbers. The numbers are choosing themselves. By the time Monique drove back to the extended stay, it was almost 2 in the morning, and the fireproof box on her dresser looked exactly the way she'd left it, a small stubborn thing she still wasn't ready to open. That was day 6. None of this had reached Grant yet. He spent day 6 approving a seating chart for the gala, moving Anastasia's name 3 spots closer to his own table and telling his event planner that photographers should be positioned near the west entrance, where the light would be best. He had no idea a woman he used to be married to was sitting at a kitchen table 40 minutes away, watching $380,000 turn into a shape he hadn't accounted for. By day 7, Monique's account had dropped under $4,000, most of it gone in one transfer. The retainer Aaliyah's office required before they'd move past paperwork and start actually sitting for anything. $6,180, gone in a single Tuesday afternoon, and what was left had to somehow stretch through a gala that was 5 days away and whatever came after it. That was the day the settlement offer arrived. It came by email, forwarded from Aaliyah with the subject line kept flat and professional. Review when you can, no rush, but it's a real number. Grant's attorney had proposed a lump sum, immediate, no litigation required. $1,100,000, structured within 30 days of signing. Enough to never think about a hotel rate again. Enough, she caught herself thinking, to just let this be over. She read it twice, standing up. She read it a third time sitting on the edge of the bed, the same edge she'd been sitting on all week, and for close to an hour, with nobody watching, she thought seriously about signing it. People who have never been this tired don't understand how close a good enough offer can look to a right one. It isn't weakness. It's arithmetic done by someone who hasn't slept enough to check her own work. Nobody would have known if she had signed it. Not Aaliyah, not Tanya, not Charisse, her mother. Just Monique, alone in room with beach or carpet, doing arithmetic on a number that would let her stop counting nights against a hotel rate. She got as far as opening the signature line on her phone before one clause, halfway down page 3, stopped her hand. Client agrees to full release of any claim, present or future, related to the transfer of intangible company assets held in either party's name. She read it 4 times. She didn't know exactly what it meant yet. She knew, the way you know weather is changing before the sky does anything visible, that nobody wrote a sentence like that into a routine divorce settlement by accident. Grant had never once, in 11 years, offered her anything without wanting something larger in return. This was generous enough to be suspicious, and suspicious was the only feeling she trusted right now. She didn't sign it. She didn't call to explain why. She just closed the laptop, walked into the bathroom, and ran the water hot enough to fog the mirror before she'd even gotten in. She called Aaliyah in the morning, careful with her words. There's a clause on page 3 I don't like, Monique said. About intangible assets. I saw it, Aaliyah said. I flagged it before I even sent you the offer. I was waiting to see if you'd catch it too. Why does a routine settlement need language like that? That, Aaliyah said, is the question I've been asking myself since Tuesday. By day 8, she had a name for what she'd almost signed away without knowing its shape. She still didn't have proof of what it was. She had 4 days left, $3,940, and a clause she couldn't stop rereading in her head at 2 in the morning, long after the water had gone cold. Day 9 arrived with a phone call before Monique had even gotten out of bed. There's a pattern within the pattern, Tanya said. No greeting, the way she talked when she'd been up since 4 working through something. The Loft Meridian payments aren't just going into an account with Grant's name near it. Some of them are lining up with due diligence fees. Somebody's shopping the company. Shopping it how? Selling a controlling stake. There's a firm called Ridgeline Capital Partners that's been in and out of Whitfield's building for weeks, according to the visitor logs Charisse pulled for me. I think the consulting fees are covering 2 things at once. Money moving to Grant personally, and money moving to make the books look clean enough for Ridgeline to sign off fast. Monique sat up in the hotel bed, the blanket still tangled around one leg. Fast meaning when? I don't have a date yet. I have enough to know it's soon. Soon enough that somebody wanted this divorce finalized before it could complicate a sale. Charisse had started pulling small things without being asked. A badge log here, a meeting room booking there. Nothing that would look like anything to anyone glancing over her shoulder. Just favors between 2 women who used to eat lunch at the same table every day and no longer worked in a place where that was allowed. Monique understood in the space of about 4 seconds, something she hadn't let herself fully consider until that moment. This was never only about Anastasia. This was about making sure that whatever happened between them, legally, personally, publicly, would be settled and closed before a new set of investors could ask a single question about who actually built this company and what she might be owed for it. She called Alia before she'd even brushed her teeth. We need the bank records, Monique said. Not the statements Grant's people chose to hand over. The actual account activity behind Loft Meridian. That requires a subpoena. A bank that small won't produce anything without one, and the registered agent's address is a P.O. box, so good luck serving anyone there directly. Then we file for it today. Alia was quiet for a second. That's an expedited motion. It's not cheap and it's not fast either. Best case 10 days. I don't have 10 days. I know, Alia said. File it anyway. Sometimes moving is the only thing that's actually free. It wasn't free. The expedited filing fee came to $3,100, due before Alia's office would even walk it to the courthouse. Monique paid it from what was left in her account without letting herself do the math out loud. That was day 9. Day 10. She did the math anyway, alone, sitting on the floor of the assisted stay because the desk chair had started making a sound she didn't want to listen to anymore. $840. 3 days of hotel left in that number if she didn't eat, closer to 2 if she did. She counted the days on her fingers twice. The way you check a number you already know is right because checking feels like doing something. It wasn't. It just felt that way, which was the only kind of comfort available to her that particular afternoon. Tanya called that evening to check in, the way she'd started doing every night without saying she was checking in. I can send you something, Tanya said. Not alone, just. Nobody has to know. I'm not taking your money, Tanya. You're not asking me for it. I'm offering. I know the difference, Monique said. I've spent 11 years learning it. I'm not taking your money. Tanya didn't push. She'd known Monique long enough to know when a door was actually closed and not just resting on its hinge. A text came in from Charisse around 9. No context, just a photo of the break room coffee machine with a sticky note taped to it that read out of order, same as always, and underneath a single line, thinking about you, don't reply if you're tired. Monique didn't reply. She saved the photo anyway. Monique skipped dinner that night, not for the first time that week, though she didn't tell anyone that either. She drank the coffee packets that came free with the room and told herself it filled the same space. That was day 10. Day 11 began with an email from Alia's office, forwarded without much commentary. A public filing, buried 3 pages into a routine business disclosure, confirming that Ridgeline Capital Partners intended to finalize its acquisition of a controlling interest in Whitfield Capital Group within the current fiscal quarter. No exact date. Close enough to one that it didn't matter. Monique read it standing in the hotel bathroom, the same mirrors she'd fogged up 4 days earlier, still faintly streaked at the corners. The subpoena Alia had filed wouldn't return anything for another 9 days, maybe longer if the bank dragged its feet the way banks usually did. 9 days put her well past the Gala, past whatever Ridgeline decided to do with the company, past any window where the truth would matter to anyone with the power to stop it. She had $411 left and 11 years of proof that patience without power just meant losing slower. Waiting had never once been the problem. Waiting when you have no leverage is just a slower way of losing, dressed up to look like dignity. She sat with that for a long time, longer than she'd sat with anything all week, and then she opened her phone and scrolled to a name she hadn't called in 4 years. Not because there had been a falling out, but because there had never been a reason to. Desmond Sutton had sat on Whitfield Capital's board since before the company had a real board to sit on. He'd been at her wedding. He'd sent flowers when her father died. 8 years ago, at a company retreat in Asheville, he'd been the only board member who'd asked Monique a single question about the loan renewal spreadsheet, instead of directing every question about the business to Grant by default. She still remembered it because it had been the only time in years someone had assumed she might actually know the answer. She didn't know yet whether fair would be enough. She didn't have time left to find out any other way. She typed a message instead of calling, because a message could be read on his own time and a call could be avoided. I need 15 minutes, not about the divorce, about the company. It's important and I wouldn't ask if it weren't. She sent it before she could talk herself out of the wording. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, the box still unopened on the dresser behind her, and watched the 3 dots appear on her screen, disappear, and appear again. They did that 3 times before stopping altogether, no message following, no read receipt she could see. She set the phone face down on the nightstand, which was its own kind of decision, and went to brush her teeth in a bathroom that still smelled faintly of the steam from 4 nights ago. 1 day left before she'd have an answer from Sutton. 1 day left before the gala tried to happen without her. She didn't sleep much that night. She'd stopped expecting to. Sutton answered at 6:15 the next morning, before Monique had even considered how she'd word a follow-up if he didn't. 8 o'clock. My house, not the office. Come alone. 3 sentences, and somehow all 3 led like relief. She was in the shower within 10 minutes, out of not because there was time to waste but because there wasn't. Tanya arrived at the extended stay at 6:45 with 2 coffees and a folder already 3 inches thick, organized by date, tabbed in 5 colors that's something only to her. You need everything you have, Tanya said, setting the folder down on the bed. Not just the parts that make the strongest case. Everything. Sutton's going to ask what else is out there, and if you don't know, that's worse than if the answer is nothing. Monique looked at the fireproof box on the dresser, the one that had ridden shotgun in her car for 11 days without once being opened. There's a box, she said. From before, I don't actually know what's in it. Tanya didn't ask why she hadn't looked. She just carried it to the bed and set it down next to the folder. The ways you'd set down something you understood mattered without needing an explanation. The lock gave on the second try, rusted more than broken. Inside, a stack of photographs curling at the corners, most of them the laundromat office, and one fancy fax machine with his sleeves rolled up. Younger, thinner, before any of this had a name. Monique picked up the photograph without meaning to, held it a beat longer than the moment required, and put it back exactly where it had been sitting for 6 years, face down, the way she'd found it. Underneath the photographs, the original yellow legal pad, its pages gone soft and brown at the edges. And underneath that, folded in thirds, a single sheet of heavier paper, the kind that had been through a printer built to make things look official, even when the company issuing it was 2 rooms above a laundromat. Neither of them stopped to read it. There wasn't time, and it didn't look, at a glance, like anything more than one more piece of 11-year-old paperwork. We'll take all of it, Tanya said, already sliding the folded sheet into the back of the folder without unfolding it further. Sort it out later. Right now, we need you out the door. Sutton's house sat at the end of a quiet street, off Providence, and in the driveway that had been there long enough to matter to him more than a newer one would have. He opened the door himself, no housekeeper, no assistant, dressed like a man about to sit through something he already suspected he wouldn't enjoy. The study smelled like old paper, and the particular kind of coffee that costs more than it needs to. A single lamp was on, even though the morning outside was bright enough not to need it. You said 15 minutes, he said, leading her into a study lined with the kind of books that get read once and kept forever. I'm giving you 30, use them well. She used them well. She started with the incorporation record. Loft Mauritian LLC, 14 months old a P.O. box for an address, no employees anywhere on paper. She set it on the desk between them and let it sit there for a moment before saying anything else. Sutton looked at it. He didn't touch it yet. She placed the second sheet beside it. The 6 inch Tanya had traced $380,000 across 3 years, and further back the eventual bank records went, if the subpoena ever came through in time to matter. Sutton's jaw moved once, almost nothing, the kind of motion a person makes when they're deciding not to react yet. She placed the third piece. The public filing confirming Ridgeline Capital Partners' pending acquisition of a controlling stake, the timeline overlapping almost exactly with the divorce filing, and the sudden generosity of the settlement offer. They're cleaning the books to sell, Monique said. And they're finalizing the divorce fast enough that whatever I might be owed starts mock sense. Who actually built this? Sutton still hadn't touched anything on the desk. She placed the fourth piece last, the settlement clause itself, the language about intangible assets, underlined where Aaliyah had underlined it 3 days earlier. I don't fully understand what this protects him from yet, Monique said. But nobody writes a sentence like that into a routine settlement by accident. The room went quiet in a way that had weight to it. Monique made herself sit still through the silence, hands flat on her knees, the way she used to sit through board meetings where nobody expected her to speak. Sutton picked up the incorporation record first, read it twice, set it down exactly where it had been, then the invoices, then the filing. He did not ask a single question until he'd read all 4 documents in the order she'd given them to him, which she understood watching him do it. It's its own kind of answer. I've seen this exact shape of number before, he said finally, not looking up. It cost me a business partner and 4 years of denial. He told her, in maybe 90 seconds, about a man named Robert Ashe, a co-founder from 30 years ago, a firm that no longer existed because Robert had spent 6 years moving client funds through 3 different shell accounts before anyone, including Sutton, had wanted to believe what the numbers were actually saying. Robert had been the one who suggested, cheerfully, that Sutton not bother reviewing the quarterly reconciliations himself. That's what we pay the accountants for, he used to say, and Sutton's had believed him for 6 years running. He didn't dress it up. He didn't make it a lesson. He just told it the way you tell something that happened to you once and never fully finished happening. I didn't want to see it then, Sutton said. I've made a private rule since. I don't get to not want to see Select in time. He was quiet again after that, long enough that Monique almost filled the silence herself before catching the impulse and letting it pass. Sutton didn't call Grant. He didn't ask what she wanted from this, or what she was owed, or whether she'd considered how this would look in the papers. He picked up his phone, scrolled to a contact, and stood up from his chair before dialing. Cecilici, he said once the call connected. I need 45 minutes today. Bring Marcus Delaney if you can reach him before noon. Tell him it's about Loft Meridian. A pause. No, not on the phone. Today. He hung up and looked at Monique properly for the first time since she'd sat down. The gala is tonight, he said. That's either the worst possible timing or the only timing that actually works. I haven't decided which yet. What happens now? Now I make calls you don't need to hear, and you go home and rest, which I doubt you'll do. He almost smiled, briefly, the first thing resembling humor in the entire 30 minutes. 11 years, Monique. Nobody asked you a single question about any of this in 11 years. I'm asking now. What do you actually want out of tonight? She thought about the answer longer than the question probably deserved. I want it to be true in front of everyone at once, she said, not in a courtroom 6 months from now. Tonight. In the room he built for himself, Sutton nodded once, the kind of nod that ends a meeting more than it agrees with anything specific. Then let's go build you a room. Monique didn't cry in the car, though she came closer than she had all week. She called Tanya first. He believed it, Monique said. All of it. Of course he did, Tanya said. You didn't bring him a feeling. You brought him a filing cabinet. Monique laughed, short and real, the first real one in 11 days. She had one more call to make before the gala, and it wasn't to Aaliyah. She sat in the parking lot for a full minute before dialing the dress shop, 3 blocks from the hotel, the only one open before 9, and asked if they had anything left in her size that didn't need alterations by tonight. She had a countdown that had just changed shape. It wasn't about surviving 12 days anymore. It was about one evening, one room, and getting the timing exactly right. At 1 o'clock, Sutton called an emergency session of what he referred to, dryly, as the 2 people on this board I actually trust to keep a secret until dinner. Cecilia Vance had been outside counsel to Whitfield Capital for 9 years, the kind of lawyer who read every footnote twice before she'd sign her own name near it. Marcus Delaney had joined the board 6 years ago, quiet at every meeting Monique had ever half listened to from the back row, the sort of man who asked one price question and then said nothing else for an hour. Neither of them had expected to spend their Friday afternoon in Sutton's study reading a folder that had, until that morning, existed only in a fireproof box and a dead woman's. No, not dead, Monique corrected the thought before it finished forming. An ex-wife's car. Cecilia read fast. Marcus read slow. Sutton watched them both. If even a third of this holds up, Cecilia said, closing the folder, the Ridgeline deal doesn't just slow down. It's over. No buyer signs a controlling stake into a company mid-embezzlement investigation. Not without a discount that would gut the valuation past the point Grant needs it to close his other obligations. Which obligations? Marcus said. The kind a man takes on when he believes a sale is guaranteed, Sutton said. We'll find out exactly what those are by Monday. Today isn't about Monday. What's today about? Cecilia said. Sutton looked at the 4 documents laid out across his desk. Still in the order Monique had placed them that morning. Today's about tonight, he said. The Gala. Every investor who matters is already flying in. If we move now quietly, we control the story before anyone else gets the chance to write it for us. They drafted the resolution in under an hour. Cecilia's language, careful and airtight, the kind built to survive a lawsuit it was specifically designed to prevent. Monique Ashworth would be named interim chief executive officer, effective immediately upon formal notice, pending a full shareholder vote within 30 days. Grant Whitfield would be relieved of all operational authority, effective the same moment, pending the outcome of an internal financial review already underway. 3 signatures. It only needed 3, given the emergency bylaw provision nobody had used in 11 years and most of the current staff didn't know existed. Sutton signed first, then Cecilia as counsel of record. Marcus signed last, slower than either of them. The way a man signs something he understands will outlast every relationship in the room. Cecilia slid the notarized copy into a plain envelope before anyone could suggest anything more theatrical. No letterhead, she said. No board seal on the outside. If this gets photographed before it gets read, I want it to look like nothing at all. He can't know before tonight, Sutton said, once the ink had dried. Not a phone call, not a text, not a lawyer's slip at lunch. If Grant finds out even 2 hours early, he cancels, he lawyers up properly, and we spend 8 months in court instead of 8 minutes at a gala. You want him walking in like nothing's wrong, Monique said. I want him walking in exactly like nothing's wrong, Sutton said. Let him have his walk-in. Let him have the table. He built his whole life on being the one people watch. Tonight, for once, that's going to work against him instead of for him. At that same hour, 40 minutes away, Grant was standing in front of a 3-way mirror at his tailor's, turning slightly left then right, while Anastasia sat in the corner chairs, through seating photos on her phone and telling him, for the 3rd time, that the navy jacket photographed better than the black one under the ballroom's particular lighting. He agreed with her. He always agreed with people who were only ever telling him things he already believed about himself. Monique thought about the calendar invite she'd read 8 days ago. The tailor fittings, the seating chart Grant had spent an entire afternoon perfecting so the photographers would catch his good side walking in with Anastasia on his arm. He had no idea the only audience that would matter tonight wasn't the one he'd built the room for. She left Sutton's house a little after 3. Cecilia had prepared the resolution, notarized once, and a second smattertizen over within the hour. An emergency motion filed that afternoon, alleging dissipation of assets. It's the kind of filing that made a settlement offer with a suspicious clause about 10 tons of assets look exactly as bad as it actually was. She had $3,911 left, once she added back what she hadn't spent that week out of habit more than planning. The dress cost $240 of it. Simple dark green. The kind of dress that didn't announce itself till clear to love but just so that fabric wasn't cheap. She didn't need it to be loud, she needed it to be true. The saleswoman, a woman near retirement age who'd clearly heard every kind of rushed request a small shop gets on a Friday afternoon, didn't ask why. She just pinned the hem an inch shorter. Said it would hold through one evening even if it wouldn't survive a second wearing, and rang her up without commenting on the total. By 6, she was dressed, sitting on the edge of the same extended stay-away bed she'd been sitting on for 12 days, the 2 envelopes squared together on the nightstand where the fireproof box used to sit. She'd left the box in Sutton's study that morning, along with everything else that didn't matter as much as what was in it. She hadn't asked what would happen to the one document neither of them had unfolded. There hadn't been time, there still wasn't. At 6:40 her phone buzzed once, a text from Sharice's just left for the venue. Car's black, not the usual one. He looks happy. Monique typed back 3 words before she could stop herself. Thank you, Sharice. And then, after a second's hesitation, one more line. You should come tonight if you want to see how this ends. Sharice's reply came almost instantly. Already have a dress in my car. Been ready for 4 days. Monique read the last one, put Wad's phone face down and picked up her keys. 12 days, and it came down to one room, one envelope, and however long it took to walk from the entrance to the table, where Grant was already telling everyone within earshot how well the evening was going to go. The Carrington's ballroom held 400 people that night, most of them investors, board members from companies that weren't Whitfield Capital, and enough camera equipment near the west entrance to make it clear where Grant intended everyone to be looking by 9 o'clock. Monique found him at the second table from the stage, Anastasia beside him in a column of pale gold silk, Grant mid-sentence to 2 men Monique recognized from a private equity firm out of Atlanta. He was laughing at something he'd said himself, the particular laugh of a man who has never once doubted that a room finds him charming. He saw her before she reached the table. His laugh didn't stop right away. It just changed shape, the way a sound does when the person making it realizes, half a second too late, that the audience has shifted. Monique. He said her name the way he might say a word he hadn't expected to need tonight. This is us not staying, she said. I just need a minute of the table's time. She set the envelope down in front of him, unmarked, sealed, exactly the way Cecilia had wanted it. Nothing about it announced itself. That was the point. Grant looked at it, then at her, then at the table, who had gone very quiet in the particular way people go quiet when they sense they've walked into something that isn't theirs to comment on. Desmond Sutton stepped forward from somewhere behind her, close enough that his presence answered a question before Grant had finished forming it. Open it, Sutton said. 2 words. The room around the table didn't go silent all at once. It went silent the way water goes still after something drops into it. First the table itself, then the 4 seats nearest it, then a widening ring of guests who couldn't have said they were reacting to, only that something had clearly just happened. Grant read the first page. His hand, Monique noticed, did not move to turn to the second. This is a joke, he said, not loudly, not yet. This isn't, Desmond. This isn't how any of this works. It's exactly how this works, Sutton said. You'd know that if you'd ever read your own bylaws as carefully as she has. Grant's eyes found Monique's. For 11 years she had watched him look at her in dozens of ways. Bored, dismissive, occasionally something close to fond on the good years. She had never once, in any of them, seen the particular look he was wearing now, the one that comes from realizing the ground had already moved before you noticed you were standing on it. Effective immediately, Monique said. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The 2 words carried the whole distance across the table, across the widening ring of guests, across whatever remained of the version of tonight Grant had planned down to the seating chart. Anastasia's hand had gone still on the tablecloth. A photographer near the stage, saying something without understanding what, lifted his camera and then lowered it again, unsure whether this was a moment meant to be captured or one that would get him thrown out for trying. Grant stood up. It took him longer than it should have. One hand on the table for balance he didn't quite need, the chair scraping loud enough that 3 more tables turned to look. This company doesn't run without me, he said. His voice had found volume now, the kind meant for the room rather than the table. I built this. Every dollar in it. You built 2 rooms above a laundromat, Monique said. I kept the books that turned it into everything after that. Nobody at the surrounding tables moved. A woman near the stage, someone Monique didn't recognize, had stopped mid-sentence with a canapé halfway to her mouth and simply left it there, forgotten what the Near the back, just inside the entrance, Sharice Boone stood in a dress she'd apparently kept ready in her car for 4 days, watching the whole thing with both hands pressed flat over her mouth, not quite hiding a smile. The board's decision stands as of this afternoon, Grant. There's a second document in there you haven't gotten to yet. Grant turned the page. Monique watched his face do the thing faces do when a second piece of bad news lands before the first one has finished landing. Not exactly, something closer to a system running out of room to process input. Marital assets, he read aloud, quieter now. Dissipation of marital. He stopped reading out loud. He gasped silently, instead's mouth still moving slightly, the way a man reads something he is hoping, against every available piece of evidence, We'll say something different the second time through. It didn't. Monique picked up her small clutch from where she'd set it on the edge of the table, unhurried, the way you collect something you know you'll need again in exactly 1 minute. Someone will be in touch about the transition, she said. Sutton has the details. I have a car waiting. She turned before Grant found anything to say back, and by the time he did, 3 words, something about lawyers, something that would not matter by Monday. She was already 6 steps away, and the room had gone quiet enough behind her that she could hear every one of them. She didn't look back to see whether he was still standing. Cecilia called at 8 the next morning, 4 hours after Monique had finally fallen asleep, sitting up in the hotel armchair, still in yesterday's dress. You should sit down for this part, Cecilia said. Actually, never mind, you're already sitting, good. What is it? The folded document. From the box. I finally had a minute to look at it properly last night, after everyone else went home. Monique waited. It's a stock certificate, Cecilia said, 22% of Whitfield Capital Group, issued to Monique R. Ashworth, dated the same month the company was originally incorporated. Filed with the state. Never transferred, never bought back, never touched in any restructuring Grant did later, because as far as I can tell, nobody who did those later restructurings ever knew this filing existed to touch. Monique sat with the phone against her ear for a long moment, saying nothing. How did nobody catch this in 9 years of audits? Monique said finally. Because the person who would have caught it was you, Cecilia said, and nobody ever thought to check the one person actually doing the checking. You've owned 1/5 of that company since before it had a real office, Cecilia said. The board didn't appoint you out of necessity yesterday, Monique. Legally, they confirmed something that was already true. She hadn't cried once in 12 days. Not at the mirror, not on the edge of the hotel bed with a settlement offer open on her phone, not standing in front of 400 people watching her hand her husband an envelope. She cried a little now, quietly, sitting alone in a room with beige carpet and a lighthouse bolted to the wall, over a piece of paper that had been sitting 6 inches from her hip in a car for 12 days, without either of them knowing what it was. Her mother called an hour later, before Monique had even washed her face. I saw something on the news this morning, her mother said. They didn't get your name right in the caption. Ashworth Whitfield. They put a hyphen where your name should have stood on its own. Monique laughed, wet and real. It's a start, Mama. It's more than a start, her mother said. It's 11 years finally spelled correctly. The press release went out that Monday morning. Whitfield Capital Group would be known, effective immediately, as Ashworth Whitfield Capital Group, a correction, the internal memo called it, not a rent break. 11 years after her name first went unmentioned in an anniversary release, it appeared in the company's name itself. First, the way it always should have. Grant's name came second now. He was no longer there to notice the order. The parking space that used to come with a title and nothing else now had her actual names stenciled on it, not a role, not a euphemism. She parked there for the first time on a Wednesday and sat in the car for a full minute before going inside, the way you sit with something you waited 11 years to just be able to do without asking permission first. Monique kept the fireproof box. She had it retained, eventually, a deep green that matched almost nothing else in her new office except the dress she'd bought for $240 with money she couldn't spare, the one still hanging in her closet, unaltered, unworn since. She never explained the box to anyone who asked what it was. She just told them it held the paperwork that mattered most, which was true, and left it at that. I keep thinking about the 12 days, not the envelope everyone remembers, not the gala, not even the certificate. I keep thinking about the 11 years before any of it. The loan renewals, the 43 page rolls, the yellow legal pad nobody photographed for an anniversary release. Sitting quietly inside a fireproof box the whole time, waiting for someone to finally check what was worth protecting. Some things aren't hidden. They're just never asked about. And the difference between the two can cost a person 11 years, if nobody happens to open the box in time.